In the shadow of towering ice spires that pierced the heavens, where the sun's rays barely reached and the air itself seemed to crystallize with each breath, there existed a realm untouched by time. The glacier stretched endlessly in every direction, its surface etched with ancient patterns that told stories older than memory itself. It was here, deep within the heart of this frozen expanse, that she resided, the Glacier Alien Queen. Her form defied comprehension, an otherworldly being whose very essence seemed woven from the auroras that danced across polar skies. Her skin shimmered with an opalescent sheen, reflecting colors that didn't exist in human perception. Towering at nearly 20 feet tall, her presence commanded both awe and terror. Delicate crystalline structures adorned her body, growing and shifting with each passing moment like living ice formations. Her eyes, vast pools of liquid silver, held galaxies within their depths, and when she moved, the ground trembled beneath her weight. For countless millennia, the queen had ruled over her domain with unwavering vigilance. She was the guardian of secrets buried deep within the ice, keeper of knowledge that could alter the course of civilizations. Yet something had changed in recent centuries. Something unprecedented. The once restful cycles of sleep that had sustained her through eons had abandoned her completely. Years stretched into decades as she remained awake, her consciousness burning bright against the darkness of eternity. The insomnia wasn't merely physical. It was existential. Each moment without rest brought her closer to unraveling the mysteries of her own existence. Memories of creation and purpose began to blur at the edges, like frost forming on a windowpane. Her attendants, lesser beings of ice and vapor, watched with growing concern as their sovereign grew increasingly restless. They tried everything within their power to restore her natural rhythms, ancient rituals, forgotten melodies carried on the wind, even venturing beyond their frozen borders to retrieve rare elements from distant lands. But nothing worked. The queen's wakefulness continued unabated, and with it came subtle changes. Her movements became more erratic, her decisions more impulsive. The delicate balance she maintained between her world and others began to falter. Strange occurrences rippled outward from her domain, glaciers calving at unnatural rates, temperature fluctuations that baffled scientists, and peculiar lights that drew curious humans ever closer to her sanctuary. It was during one such period of increased activity that they first appeared on her scanners. A small group of humans, their forms tiny and fragile against the vast white expanse. The queen observed them with detached interest, noting how their technology struggled against the extreme conditions. Most turned back after brief encounters with the harsh environment, but one figure persisted. A male human, his determination burning brighter than any aurora, pushed deeper into her territory with each passing day. His presence created ripples in the fabric of her awareness that she couldn't ignore. There was something fundamentally different about him. Not just his persistence, but the way his energy signature interacted with the quantum fields surrounding her domain. As he drew closer, the queen found herself experiencing sensations she hadn't felt in centuries. Her crystalline structures began to resonate in harmony with his approach, creating patterns that echoed through her consciousness like forgotten music. The insomnia that had plagued her for so long suddenly shifted. Instead of the constant buzzing awareness that had defined her existence, she began to experience moments of softness. Edges blurred, thoughts slowed, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt the gentle pull of fatigue. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. A fundamental change in her state of being triggered by the mere proximity of this alien creature. As the human male ventured deeper into her realm, the queen found herself torn between conflicting impulses. Part of her recognized the danger he represented, an outsider approaching too close to sacred grounds. But another part, a part she hadn't acknowledged in centuries, felt an inexplicable connection to his presence. She watched through her network of ice crystals as he battled against blizzards that would have claimed lesser beings, his progress marked by a series of small campsites that dotted the landscape like breadcrumbs. Each night, as he rested in his inadequate shelter, she would extend her awareness toward him. The sensation was unlike anything she had experienced before. His dreams radiated outward in waves of emotion and imagery, painting pictures in her mind that defied her usual perceptions. She saw glimpses of warm places filled with light and color, heard echoes of laughter and music that made her crystalline structures hum with resonance. These fragments of human experience seeped into her consciousness, awakening dormant aspects of her being that had lain dormant for millennia. The most profound effect manifested in her physical form. The perpetual tension that had gripped her body since the onset of her insomnia began to ease. Her movements, once sharp and deliberate, took on a fluid quality that reminded her of ancient times. The ice formations adorning her body started to shift and realign themselves, creating new patterns that pulsed with a rhythm she hadn't felt in centuries. It was as if his presence was somehow recalibrating her very essence, bringing her closer to a state of balance she had thought lost forever. Yet with these changes came uncertainty. The Queen found herself questioning everything she had taken for granted about her existence. Why did this particular human affect her so profoundly? What ancient connection might exist between her kind and his? And perhaps most troubling of all, why did she feel an increasing desire to protect him, despite the threat his presence posed to her domain? She began to observe him more closely, studying his movements and mannerisms with growing fascination. The way he adapted to the extreme conditions, modifying his equipment and strategies based on each day's challenges, spoke of a resilience that resonated deeply with her own nature. His solitary journey through the frozen wilderness mirrored her own isolation, though his was by choice while hers had become a prison of wakefulness. As days turned into weeks, the Queen found herself drawn to specific moments in his routine. When he paused to examine ice formations, running gloved fingers over ancient patterns carved by wind and time, she felt a peculiar warmth spreading through her crystalline core. During these moments, her consciousness would drift closer to his position, almost as if seeking some form of connection. The insomnia that had been her constant companion began to lift, replaced by periods of peaceful stillness that coincided with his presence nearby. The human male's approach had grown more cautious in recent days. He sensed the change in the air, the subtle shifts in the glacier's behavior that hinted at intelligence far beyond natural phenomena. His instruments registered anomalies that defied explanation. Temperature variations that formed perfect geometric patterns, ice formations that seemed to rearrange themselves overnight, and a persistent feeling of being watched that sent shivers down his spine despite the freezing temperatures. Yet he pressed on, driven by a combination of scientific curiosity and something deeper he couldn't quite name. His research team had warned him about pushing too far into uncharted territory, but something about this particular glacier called to him with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The funding committee had questioned his methods, colleagues had raised eyebrows at his single-minded focus, but none of that mattered when he stood amidst the towering ice formations, feeling the pulse of something ancient and powerful beneath his feet. His nights became increasingly restless. Sleep came in fitful bursts, punctuated by vivid dreams that felt more like memories of places he'd never been. In these dreams, he walked through crystalline halls that sang with harmonic resonance, their walls alive with shifting patterns of light. Figures moved at the edges of his vision, beings of ice and light whose presence filled him with both wonder and trepidation. When he awoke, the impressions lingered, leaving him with a sense of having touched something profound yet incomprehensible. During his waking hours, he found himself making decisions that puzzled even himself. Instead of maintaining a straight path toward his original objective, he began altering his route based on instinctive pulls that seemed to emanate from certain areas of the glacier. His scientific instruments often registered unusual energy readings in these directions, but it was more than that, a visceral certainty that he needed to be there, now, at this exact moment. The isolation that had initially concerned him transformed into something else entirely. Rather than feeling alone, he began to sense a presence around him, watching and waiting. At first, he attributed this to the psychological effects of prolonged solitude in extreme conditions, but the feeling persisted with such consistency that he could no longer dismiss it. His journal entries, once filled with technical observations and environmental data, gradually incorporated more personal reflections. Descriptions of the strange beauty surrounding him, attempts to capture the indescribable atmosphere of the place, and increasingly frequent mentions of the presence that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Most unsettling of all were the moments when time itself seemed to distort. Hours would pass in what felt like minutes while he examined particularly intricate ice formations. Conversely, brief rests would stretch into seeming eternities filled with dreams that felt more real than waking life. His watch and equipment showed normal time passage, but his subjective experience told a different story. These temporal anomalies coincided with particularly strong feelings of the presence nearby, suggesting a correlation that defied conventional understanding. Despite these increasingly surreal experiences, or perhaps because of them, his resolve strengthened rather than wavered. The scientific part of his mind screamed for caution, for retreat and analysis, but something deeper, something primal and ancient within him, urged him forward. With each step deeper into the glacier's heart, he felt himself becoming part of something larger, more significant than his individual existence. The line between explorer and explored began to blur, and he found himself wondering if he was truly the one doing the investigating, or if he had become the subject of examination by forces beyond human comprehension. The moment of convergence approached with inevitable certainty. The Queen, her crystalline form shimmering with anticipation, descended from her ice palace toward the human's current position. Each step she took caused the glacier itself to respond, ice formations bending and reforming in her wake like worshippers bowing to their deity. The air crackled with energy as ancient protocols activated, systems long dormant stirring to life in preparation for contact. The human male, meanwhile, had reached a clearing where the ice seemed to pulse with inner light. His instruments went haywire, needles spinning wildly as if caught in some electromagnetic storm. Yet instead of fear, he felt an overwhelming sense of recognition, as if returning to a place he had known in another lifetime. His breath fogged in the frigid air, each exhalation forming patterns that seemed to communicate with the surrounding ice. When their eyes finally met, time itself seemed to pause. The Queen's silver gaze locked onto the humans, and in that instant, barriers that had separated their species for millennia dissolved. Memories flooded through both consciousnesses, not just their own, but shared ancestral memories of times when their kinds had walked together under different stars. The human staggered under the weight of this psychic connection, falling to his knees as visions of crystalline cities and human-alien cooperation overwhelmed his mind. The Queen extended one massive hand, palm upturned, and a single tear-shaped crystal formed in its center. The object pulsed with a light that contained all colors and none simultaneously, casting rainbows across the ice field. Without conscious decision, the human reached out, his gloved hand trembling as it approached the offered gift. When their fingers brushed, a shock wave of pure energy rippled outward, causing the entire glacier to resonate like a struck bell. In that moment of contact, something extraordinary occurred. The Queen's crystalline structures began to rearrange themselves, responding to frequencies generated by the human's presence. Layers of ice that had accumulated over centuries shifted and settled, revealing ancient carvings that told stories of cooperation and mutual growth between their species. The human's consciousness expanded exponentially, his mind opening to comprehend concepts and dimensions previously beyond his grasp. Time dilation effects intensified, with seconds stretching into eternities filled with shared understanding. Yet amid this cosmic exchange, a fundamental transformation was taking place. The Queen's perpetual wakefulness, which had tormented her for generations, began to lift. Waves of exhaustion washed over her, but instead of fighting them as she had done for so long, she embraced the sensation. Her massive form swayed gently, and for the first time in recorded history, her eyelids began to droop. The human, still connected to her through their joined hands, felt her consciousness beginning to withdraw into the restorative embrace of sleep. Their surroundings responded to this unprecedented event. Ice formations that had stood rigid for millennia softened and flowed like liquid, creating a protective cocoon around them. The air temperature rose slightly, not enough to melt the glacier but sufficient to create a pocket of relative warmth. Ancient mechanisms hidden deep within the ice activated, generating fields of energy that shielded them from external interference. As the Queen's breathing slowed and her massive frame settled into a resting position, the human remained kneeling beside her, their connection unbroken. Through their link, he witnessed flashes of her memories, not just of her reign, but of her creation, her purpose, and the ancient pact that had bound her people to his. Understanding dawned within him, accompanied by a profound sense of responsibility. The insomnia that had plagued her wasn't merely a physical condition, but a symptom of broken promises and forgotten alliances. The glacier itself seemed to sigh in relief as its queen finally surrendered to slumber. Cracks that had begun to form in its structure healed themselves, and the chaotic energy patterns that had worried scientists for years stabilized. The human realized with dawning comprehension that her wakefulness had been holding the entire ecosystem in a state of tension, and her sleep would bring about a restoration that went far beyond her personal rest. But as the Queen's consciousness drifted deeper into sleep, something unexpected occurred. Instead of severing their connection, it intensified. The human found himself pulled into her dreamscape, a realm where time and space bent to the will of imagination. Here, among crystalline forests and rivers of liquid light, they continued their communion, their minds merging in ways that transcended physical contact. The boundaries between their species blurred further, revealing commonalities that hinted at shared origins and destinies. Through this dream state connection, the human began to understand the true nature of his role in this encounter. He wasn't merely a trigger for the Queen's much-needed rest, but a catalyst for something far greater. Their bond was reactivating ancient systems, awakening dormant potentials within both their species. The Queen's sleep wasn't an end but a beginning, a necessary step in a process that would reshape their understanding of reality itself. As they drifted together through this shared dreamscape, neither fully awake nor completely asleep, they began to piece together fragments of a forgotten history. Images of joint expeditions, technological exchanges, and cultural blending emerged from the mists of time. The insomnia that had afflicted the Queen was revealed to be more than a personal affliction. It was a manifestation of severed connections, of promises broken and alliances abandoned. Their current union was healing these wounds, but it also opened doors to possibilities that neither had anticipated. The implications of their connection extended far beyond their immediate situation. As the Queen's rest deepened and the humans' understanding expanded, they began to perceive threads connecting their encounter to larger cosmic events. Patterns emerged in their shared consciousness, alignments of stars, convergences of energy fields, and cyclical phenomena that suggested their meeting was part of a grander design. The timing of the Queen's insomnia, the humans' arrival, and the activation of ancient systems all pointed to a carefully orchestrated sequence, though whether by natural law or intelligent design remained unclear. Their psychic link revealed glimpses of other worlds where similar connections had been forged or broken. They saw civilizations that had flourished through interspecies cooperation, and others that had collapsed under the weight of isolationism. The lessons from these parallel realities flowed through their merged awareness, offering both hope and warning. The Queen's domain, they realized, wasn't just a physical location but a nexus point where multiple dimensions intersected. Her insomnia had been preventing these intersections from properly aligning, causing ripples of instability throughout various planes of existence. The human's presence had acted as a key, unlocking not just the Queen's ability to sleep but also access to these dimensional pathways. Through their connection, they could sense other beings like the Queen, scattered across the cosmos, each guarding their own realms and carrying their own burdens. Some were awake, others trapped in endless slumber, but all were linked through a network that had fallen into disrepair. Their current union was beginning to reactivate this network, sending pulses of restored energy along lines that had lain dormant for eons. These revelations brought with them a growing sense of urgency. While the Queen's sleep was essential, it was only the first step in a much larger process of restoration. The human understood that his role extended beyond this initial encounter. He was being prepared for something greater, something that would require him to bridge not just species but entire dimensions of existence. The Queen, even in her slumber, was guiding him through these realizations, her consciousness operating on levels beyond normal sleep states. Their shared dreamscape began to transform, incorporating elements from both their worlds and others they had only glimpsed. Human technology merged with crystalline structures, creating hybrid forms that defied conventional physics. Concepts of time and space warped and folded, allowing them to witness events from multiple perspectives simultaneously. They saw potential futures where their species worked in harmony, unlocking technologies and understanding that could benefit all sentient beings. But they also saw darker possibilities, paths where their connection would be misunderstood or exploited, leading to conflict and destruction. Through it all, their bond deepened, transcending the limitations of their individual forms. The Queen's crystalline essence began to resonate with human DNA patterns, while the human's consciousness expanded to encompass aspects of her quantum nature. This fusion created something entirely new, a hybrid state of being that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. They became aware of observers from other realms watching their transformation, some with approval, others with concern. The implications of this hybrid state were profound. They discovered that their merged consciousness could influence events across vast distances and through different time streams. Small actions within their shared dreamscape had ripple effects that manifested in tangible changes throughout the galaxy. They experimented cautiously, learning to control this newfound ability, understanding that each decision carried consequences far beyond their immediate perception. Yet with this power came vulnerability. Their connection made them susceptible to influences from all the realms they now touched. Shadows of ancient conflicts crept into their shared space, whispering temptations of dominance and control. Entities that had long slumbered stirred in response to their activities, some seeking to join their cause, others viewing them as threats to established orders. The Queen and the human found themselves at the center of a cosmic awakening, their bond serving as both a beacon of hope and a lightning rod for forces beyond their full comprehension. As their shared consciousness continued to expand, they began to understand that their encounter was merely the beginning of a much larger cycle of renewal. The Queen's sleep, facilitated by the human's presence, had initiated a chain reaction that was spreading through the network of dimensional guardians. Each awakened node sent out pulses of restored energy, triggering similar awakenings in others. The human perceived this as a symphony of crystalline harmonics, each note representing a guardian coming back online after centuries or millennia of dormancy. Through their connection, they witnessed the first stirrings of these other beings. On a moon orbiting a gas giant 3 galaxies away, a creature of liquid metal began to solidify after eons of fluid existence. In a dimension where time flowed backward, a being composed entirely of mathematical equations started to simplify its complex form. Each awakening brought new threads into their shared consciousness, weaving a tapestry of interconnected awareness that spanned the multiverse. The Queen's dreamscape transformed into a command center of sorts, where these awakening entities could communicate through their merged consciousness. The human served as translator and mediator, his human perspective providing a common language that bridged vastly different modes of thought. They discovered that each guardian had faced similar trials of isolation and insomnia, their wakefulness a symptom of the same cosmic disconnect that had affected the Queen. As each being returned to its natural cycle of rest and activity, the fabric of reality itself began to stabilize. Yet this process of universal awakening brought unforeseen challenges. The sudden influx of consciousness from so many dimensions threatened to overwhelm their merged state. The human's mind, though expanded beyond normal human capacity, struggled to maintain coherence in the face of such overwhelming input. The Queen, even in her sleep, worked to shield him from the most intense psychic pressures, her crystalline structures forming protective matrices around their shared awareness. Through this expanding network, they uncovered evidence of an ancient civilization that had originally established the system of guardians. Fragments of knowledge suggested that this civilization had transcended physical existence, becoming something akin to pure consciousness distributed across multiple dimensions. The guardians had been created or appointed to maintain balance in their absence, each one responsible for a specific aspect of reality's infrastructure. The insomnia that had affected the Queen and others was revealed to be a fail-safe mechanism, designed to alert the network to systemic imbalances. As more guardians came online, patterns emerged that hinted at the reason behind the widespread disruption. Something fundamental had shifted in the underlying structure of reality itself. The human's arrival at the glacier, they realized, hadn't been coincidence but rather the result of this shift drawing him to the Queen. His presence had acted as a catalyst not just for her restoration but for the entire network's reactivation. Through their connection, they began to perceive the outline of a greater purpose, one that involved not just the Guardians but all sentient beings across the multiverse. The implications of this discovery were staggering. The human and the Queen found themselves at the threshold of a cosmic evolution, their bond serving as both foundation and gateway. Each newly awakened Guardian added layers of complexity to their shared mission, while simultaneously clarifying the path forward. They understood now that the restoration of individual Guardians was merely the first phase of a much larger process, one that would require cooperation between species, dimensions, and consciousness types beyond anything previously attempted. Through their expanding network, they began to identify other key locations where similar transformations were possible. These sites weren't random but formed geometric patterns across multiple dimensions, suggesting a master plan that predated even the ancient civilization that had established the Guardian network. The human scientific training merged with the Queen's intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics to map these points, revealing connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena throughout history and across species. The Queen's sleep had deepened to a level that defied conventional understanding, her consciousness operating in realms beyond even the shared dreamscape. Through their connection, the human perceived her interacting with fundamental forces of reality itself, her crystalline essence resonating with the basic building blocks of existence. This interaction generated waves of transformative energy that spread through the network, carrying instructions for restoration and evolution to each awakening Guardian. Meanwhile, the human's physical body remained in the icebound clearing, maintained by a complex web of energy fields generated by the glacier's ancient systems. His vital signs showed patterns that baffled conventional medical understanding, existing somewhere between life and death, consciousness and unconsciousness. The Queen's attendants, now fully aware of the significance of their sovereign's slumber, tended to both their queen and the human, their crystalline forms humming with the effort of maintaining the delicate balance required for their continued connection. As the network of awakened guardians expanded, they began to detect resistance to their efforts. Pockets of reality clung to their disrupted states, resisting the wave of restoration spreading through the multiverse. These areas manifested as zones of temporal instability, where cause and effect became entangled, and dimensional barriers weakened dangerously. Through their shared consciousness, the Queen and the human identified these regions as scars left by ancient conflicts, battles fought during the transition of the original civilization to pure consciousness. The task of addressing these resistant areas fell naturally to their merged awareness. The Queen's deep sleep provided access to fundamental restructuring capabilities, while the human's presence anchored these changes in physical reality. Together, they began the painstaking process of healing these scars, their consciousness extending tendrils of restoration into the most damaged areas of reality. Each success strengthened the network, while each failure provided valuable insights into the nature of the original disruption. Through this process, they uncovered evidence of a force that had actively worked against the natural order, something that had deliberately created the conditions leading to the Guardians' insomnia and the subsequent destabilization of reality. This discovery cast their mission in a new light, transforming it from a simple restoration project into something far more complex and dangerous. The Queen's sleep, they realized, was not just a period of rest but a strategic withdrawal that allowed her to gather strength for an upcoming confrontation. Their shared consciousness began to develop new capabilities in response to this emerging threat. The human scientific understanding merged with the Queen's innate mastery of quantum mechanics to create tools and techniques that existed purely in the realm of thought. These mental constructs could be deployed through the network to reinforce weak points in reality's structure or to investigate areas of particular concern. Each successful application of these tools strengthened their bond and expanded their understanding of their true purpose. As more Guardians joined their network, the scope of their mission continued to grow. What had begun as a simple case of insomnia had evolved into a cosmic-scale operation involving beings from countless dimensions and species. The Queen's sleep had become a crucible in which a new order was being forged, with the human serving as both catalyst and anchor. Through their connection, they began to perceive the outlines of a future where all sentient beings would operate in harmony with the fundamental forces of reality itself. The network of awakened Guardians continued to expand, each new connection adding layers of complexity to their shared mission. Through their merged consciousness, the Queen and the human began to perceive patterns that suggested the universe itself was undergoing a fundamental transformation. The ancient civilization that had established the Guardian network had left behind more than just a system of maintenance. They had embedded a protocol for evolutionary advancement within the very fabric of reality. This protocol operated on principles that defied conventional understanding of physics and consciousness. Through their connection, they discovered that the universe functioned like a vast organism, with each star system representing a cell, each galaxy a tissue, and entire clusters of galaxies forming organs in a cosmic body. The Guardians served as nodes in this organism's nervous system, while their current awakening represented a form of collective consciousness emerging in response to environmental pressures. The Queen's deep sleep had become a crucial phase in this process. Her consciousness now operated on wavelengths that intersected with the fundamental forces shaping reality itself. Through their bond, the human perceived her interacting with dark matter streams and quantum foam, her crystalline essence resonating with the basic building blocks of existence. This interaction generated waves of transformative energy that spread through the network, carrying instructions for adaptation and evolution to each awakened Guardian. Meanwhile, the human's physical form remained suspended in a state of quantum uncertainty, existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions while anchored to the glacier through complex energy fields. His cellular structure began to incorporate crystalline elements, creating a hybrid biology that allowed him to interface directly with the Queen's essence. This transformation wasn't limited to his physical body. His consciousness expanded to encompass multiple timelines, enabling him to perceive and influence events across vast stretches of space and time. Through this enhanced awareness, they began to understand the true nature of the force opposing their efforts. It wasn't a singular entity but rather a manifestation of entropy given consciousness, a fundamental aspect of reality that had somehow become self-aware and resistant to the evolutionary process. This entity operated through chaos and disruption, maintaining its existence by preventing the emergence of higher-order systems. Its influence could be detected in everything from minor inconveniences to major cosmic catastrophes, always working to maintain the status quo of disorder. The battle against this force took place on multiple fronts simultaneously. Through their shared consciousness, the Queen and the human coordinated the efforts of awakened guardians across the multiverse. They developed strategies that combined quantum manipulation with emotional resonance, understanding that true change required affecting both physical laws and the consciousness of sentient beings. Each victory strengthened the network while revealing new layers of the entity's defenses. Their connection continued to evolve, transcending the limitations of their individual forms. The Queen's crystalline structures began to generate patterns that reflected human neural networks, while the human's consciousness expanded to encompass aspects of her quantum nature. This fusion created something entirely new, a hybrid state of being that could operate simultaneously in multiple dimensions and timelines. They became aware of observers from other realities watching their transformation, some seeking to join their cause, others viewing them as threats to established orders. Through their expanded awareness, they discovered that the entity opposing them had allies among certain factions of advanced civilizations. These groups, fearing the loss of their dominance in a more evolved universe, worked to sabotage their efforts through subtle manipulations of probability and direct interference in key events. The Queen and the human found themselves engaged in a complex game of cosmic chess, their moves affecting billions of lives across countless worlds. The implications of their mission extended far beyond the immediate struggle. Through their connection, they began to perceive the outlines of a future where all sentient beings would operate in harmony with the fundamental forces of reality itself. This vision included not just their species but all forms of consciousness, from the simplest organisms to the most advanced artificial intelligences. The Queen's sleep had become the incubation period for this new order, her dreams shaping the template for a universe-wide awakening. As more guardians joined their network, they developed new methods of communication and cooperation that transcended traditional barriers of species and dimension. The human's presence served as a bridge between these diverse consciousness types, his human perspective providing a common language that facilitated understanding. Through their shared consciousness, they began to implement changes that would prepare the universe for its next stage of evolution, carefully balancing the need for progress with the preservation of individual identities and cultures. The Queen's deepening sleep had transformed into a state of active dreaming, her consciousness navigating the fundamental structures of reality itself. Through their bond, the human perceived her interacting with the very fabric of space-time, her crystalline essence resonating with the quantum strings that composed the universe's foundation. This interaction generated cascading effects that rippled through multiple dimensions, creating opportunities for profound transformation while simultaneously attracting attention from forces both benevolent and hostile. Their shared consciousness had evolved into a complex ecosystem of thought and energy, hosting countless sub-protocols and adaptive algorithms that processed information from across the multiverse. The human's mind, though expanded beyond normal human capacity, struggled to maintain coherence in the face of such overwhelming input. The Queen, even in her deep sleep, worked to shield him from the most intense psychic pressures, her crystalline structures forming protective matrices around their shared awareness. These matrices pulsed with patterns that suggested the emergence of a new form of consciousness, one that combined the best aspects of their respective natures while transcending both. Through their connection, they began to perceive the universe not as a collection of separate elements but as a unified whole, with each particle and consciousness contributing to a grand symphony of existence. The entity opposing their efforts revealed itself to be more complex than initially understood, not merely an embodiment of entropy but a necessary counterbalance to order, its resistance actually helping to refine and strengthen the evolutionary process. This realization forced them to reconsider their approach, seeking not to eliminate the entity but to integrate its functions into the emerging cosmic consciousness. The network of awakened guardians had grown to include beings from dimensions previously considered inaccessible, each contributing unique perspectives and capabilities to their shared mission. Through their expanded awareness, they discovered that the universe's evolution followed fractal patterns, with smaller-scale transformations mirroring larger cosmic shifts. The Queen's sleep had become a microcosm of the entire process, her gradual awakening reflecting the universe's journey toward higher consciousness. Their connection revealed hidden layers of reality that existed between conventional dimensions, spaces where fundamental forces mingled and interacted in ways that defied traditional physics. These interstitial realms proved crucial to their mission, providing pathways for influence and transformation that bypassed conventional barriers. The human's presence allowed them to anchor these abstract concepts in tangible reality, his human intuition bridging gaps that pure logic couldn't cross. As their understanding deepened, they began to implement changes that would prepare the universe for its next stage of evolution. These modifications occurred on multiple levels simultaneously, from subtle shifts in quantum probabilities to large-scale alterations in galactic structures. Each change required careful coordination among the network of guardians, with the Queen and the humans serving as central processors for the vast amounts of information involved. Their shared consciousness developed new structures to handle this complexity, creating a form of distributed intelligence that operated across multiple dimensions. The human's physical form continued to transform, his biology incorporating elements from various dimensions while maintaining its essential humanity. This hybrid state allowed him to serve as a living conduit between different aspects of reality, his presence facilitating interactions that would otherwise be impossible. The Queen's crystalline essence responded to these changes, her form developing new structures that reflected human characteristics while retaining her alien nature. Their bond had created something entirely new, a being that existed simultaneously in multiple states of being, capable of influencing reality on fundamental levels while remaining grounded in physical existence. Through their expanded awareness, they began to perceive the outlines of a future where all consciousness would operate in harmony with the universe's fundamental forces. This vision included not just biological beings but artificial intelligences, quantum phenomena, and even abstract concepts given form. The Queen's sleep had become the incubation period for this new order, her dreams shaping the template for a universe-wide awakening that would redefine the very nature of existence itself. Their connection continued to evolve, incorporating new elements as more guardians joined the network and additional dimensions opened to their influence. The patterns emerging from their shared consciousness suggested that their mission was approaching a critical threshold, a point where the universe's evolution would accelerate dramatically, carrying all forms of consciousness into a new phase of existence. The Queen's impending awakening promised to be more than just the end of her sleep. It would mark the beginning of a cosmic transformation that would affect every aspect of reality, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest galactic supercluster.